Well, hey everyone, welcome to another podcast. So, YouTube has stated that they are now focusing on podcast as well. And not much has been said about it. So, if you're listening to an audio version of this, I'm not sure if it's because they're now sharing these on audio only platforms like traditional podcasts or what, but not much has been said about how they're going to handle podcasts. They just add the ability to have a playlist for podcasts on our YouTube channels. So if you're listening to an audio version of this, I just want to tell you that there is a video version out on my YouTube channel, which is Scott Hervieux, spelled Hervieux Outdoors. Scott Hervieux Outdoors. So, yeah, welcome to another podcast. I'm filming part of this right now outdoors as I'm walking through the woods because technically we're pretty much into springtime. It's past March 1st, which is meteorological spring. We're a couple days shy of astronomical spring, which is when the calendar flips to spring on March 20th. Today's a somewhat cool but beautiful day. It's not quite 50 degrees, although we do have the March winds kicking up, and also making the temperature just a little bit cooler. It's past hunting season, not required to wear orange, so I just grabbed the nearest hat that was available and just happened to be my orange hat as opposed to the gray one that I normally wear in the winter when I'm not in the woods. The other reason why I'm walking in the woods today is because I want to share a couple thoughts now that hunting season is over, to actually talk about hunting. First thought, though, I want to talk about this winter weather. Winter was pretty much a no-show here in Rhode Island, southern New England area. We barely got any snow. We had no ice for ice fishing. Most days were pretty close to being above 50 degrees. Now that March is here, we got more snow in March, although it didn't last long on the ground, than we did all winter long. Which, don't get me wrong, I love my winter snowy walks through the woods. I love snowshoeing. Don't do much skiing anymore, but now that I'm in my mid-50s, I totally despise shoveling snow. So, yeah, glad spring is here, but March is definitely coming in like a lion. So the other thing I want to talk about with hunting season is a lot of people are complaining here in Rhode Island about the lack of birds out in the woods, not many pheasant. And I heard from one guy that they had only stocked maybe 10 birds a week at each location. The DEM did put out a statement say that the average cost of a pheasant to stock is $15. Now, they did not specify whether it was $15 for them to acquire the bird from whatever farm was raising them and then releasing them, or was $15 for them to raise them themselves. So you figure 10 times 15 is $150 per week at each location. The town I live in has 3 hunting locations that are stocked with birds, so you're up into the $350 to $400 range per week. Now, here's the thing with that. A lot of people also complain about the increased costs in our hunting licenses over the years. Hunting has been on a real decline here in New England, in Rhode Island. Less than 1% of all Rhode Islanders even hunt anymore, and truthfully, I have seen less and less hunters out in the woods every year. So that's the cost of our licenses provided to that is really going down for the state. They're trying to keep these public areas, game lands open so that we can enjoy them and not being sold off to developers. Especially since there's a push in the town that I live in to keep it rural from becoming more and more of a subdivision. There's a lot of land being sold off that's being clear cut for solar farms, turning into private property and being sold off for professional development spaces and professional offices, which in a way kind of is contradictory to what's going on right now. Since the That's a low flying plane. Since the pandemic, a lot of people are still working remotely. With the economy, a lot of people are selling off their professional or moving out of their professional spaces, working remotely in their own homes to kind of save the cost. So I'm not really sure about these professional developments that they got planned. Also, they're building more and more affordable housing apartment complexes, which I don't know if you can define affordable unless it's Section 8 approved, and they're going to allow a lot of Section 8 in there, because the average cost of the apartment now is $1,600 to $2,000 with no utilities. And also, the average job here in Rhode Island and most of southern New England only pays minimum wage. I don't know who can afford that. So they're trying to keep these lands open. But the problem is, with less hunters, the increased cost of these birds, it's really being hard to do that. So just something to think about when you start complaining about the less birds and the increased hunting fees. Okay, so I'm not sure if this camera is picking up or not, but if you hear any like strange roaring in the background of cars and screeching tires, it sounds like that there's a bunch of cars practicing at Thompson Speedway, which is not too far from here. The sound does carry from that distance up into the woods up here. So sounds like they're practicing and getting ready for the spring racing season that's going to be coming up. So the other thing I want to talk about hunting is, there's a lot going on with gun control right now in the United States, and I know many of you are on both sides of the fence on this. I don't want to get into all the political issues. I just want to bring up something that I have heard about coming from the last meeting to discuss how we're handling the sales of guns at the store that I work at in Connecticut. Now, in Connecticut, when you buy a firearm, whether it be a long gun or a pistol, with the exception of muzzleloaders, they don't consider muzzleloaders a firearm, but any type of shotgun, rifle, or handgun, also the exception of BB guns, you have to call the state and get an authorization. They run a quick background check, and they will come back with an authorization number to proceed with the sale, a denial, or a 2-day wait. One of the things that has come up is that because we have stores also located in New York, the state of New York is now also requiring a call to the state for ammunition. So not only does that include handgun ammunition, that also includes your average shotgun shells. And that even goes for people who are into sporting, who buy like the number 7.5, number 8, or the size 8 or 9 sport clay shells for going to the local gun clubs or competition. So anytime anybody buys any type of ammunition, shotgun shells or whatever, now has to get authorization from the state of New York to obtain their ammunition, not just a firearm. So I know that's going to make a lot of hunters mad. Hopefully it gets repealed. But, you know, here's my thing. We have a Constitution here in the United States. Second Amendment rights says that I can own a firearm. We also have a Fourth Amendment Bill of Rights that says I have the right to feel safe and secure in my home and in persons, which also to me includes owning a firearm if you so choose. Unfortunately, there has been more and more bans against ammunition, being able to wear any type of body protection, even though a lot of your cities, I would not go out without wearing some sort of bulletproof vest nowadays. And also, now with this whole thing about banning ammunition and obtaining authorization for ammunition. Um, Government's got to remember that they work for us. Here's my opinion. Let's get tough on crime, okay? Stop all the nonsense with the guns, because everybody knows that somebody of the criminal mind, criminal element who wants to commit a crime is going to obtain them no matter what. They're either going to obtain them off the streets on black market sales, buy them privately from somebody else, break into a store or whatever and steal them, or take them from a law-abiding citizen who might be carrying, who wants to protect themselves. So we need to get more tough on crimes and less tough on actual gun ownership for the legal, law-abiding citizen, because now we're affecting people who want to shoot for sport, whether that be hunting, going to your local rod and gun club and shooting clay pigeons, trap, or whatever you want to call them. Also gets into people who shoot competition. So yeah, let's get more tough on crime, people, and not get more and more restrictive on who can own guns. The western states and also the state of Maine that allow open carry without a permit, and it's a lot easier to get a concealed carry permit, have less crimes than these cities that have total gun control or ban all types of gun in their cities. Look at DC, Chicago, Seattle as an example. So enough said about that. So it looks like the DEM has been up through here recently on this road out in the middle of the woods, doing some grading and repairing and getting ready for fire season during the midsummer, and possibly getting ready to do a couple of controlled burns before we get into fire season during the midsummer. By the looks of some of these tracks, it looks like they've been up here with some real heavy equipment. So while we're on the subject of the DEM, wildlife officials, game wardens, wildlife control officers, or whatever you call them in your state or area, let's talk about hunting apparel, attire. Some people call it fashion. Don't know why. But let's talk about what the DEM requires you to wear. So right now the requirement is blaze orange, pretty much like the hat that I'm wearing. How much really depends on the season of hunting. So like here in Rhode Island, 2 weeks prior the start of hunting season through 2 weeks after the end of hunting season, you have to wear 200 square inches, which is pretty much a hat. During shotgun season for deer, you have to wear 500 square inches, which is a hat and jacket or a hat and vest. Now, every few years, they want to change that requirement. And we're particularly talking about the blaze orange. So, since at least the 1960s, I was born at the end of the 1960s, early 1970s period, so I don't know how much went on before that. Blaze orange has been pretty much a requirement. A lot of places were lax about it. A lot of hunters used to go out pretty much in a jacket like I'm wearing today, plaid red with a camouflage hat on for deer season. And I'll put up a picture real quick that shows my friend in that attire back in the early 1990s as we were deer hunting up in Vermont. So every few years it comes up with a discussion of these people, these officials, that they want to change away from blaze orange to hot pink. Their reason being that the color orange blends in way too much with the fall foliage leaf colors during the fall hunting season. I don't know any hunter that would actually wear hot pink, even out in the woods like I am today by myself, let alone meeting up in a parking lot with a bunch of other hunters heading into the woods or at deer camp. So let's just leave that part alone for a minute. But yeah, they want to change from blaze orange to hot pink so it doesn't blend all much. I'm going to put up a picture right now. This is what we're talking about. This picture was taken at the store that I work at, where we have the standard blaze orange hunting vest right next to a hot pink vest that just happened to be labeled as women's, but this is the color that they're talking about switching to. Like I said, I don't know any hunters that would wear this. So the other thing is, to my eye, being out in the woods on a day like today, or even the fall foliage, my eyes, now I'm not sure if that's because I have been trained to look for the blaze orange, and I have been hunting for the good part of almost 30 years now, off and on, to look for the orange and to be sure of my background. But to me, if I was out in the woods and I was to see those two, other than being the color pink on a guy, off in the distance, I would not see too much difference as to being which color I would notice first. Okay? Because to me, the pink and the orange, while they're both bright, really would not stand out as a color to really be aware of, one versus the other. The other thing is, there are a good number of our population that are colorblind. And if you know anything about color blindness at all, most of the people I talk to that are colorblind, the color that they have the hardest time distinguishing are red and kind of dull green. So they really can't see the color red. Matter of fact, there was a guy who came in to buy a gun, and it came up that he had answered some fields incorrectly that the system did not like, and they were showing in red to correct his responses. And even though we're not supposed to help them, I had to tell him which fields he needed to correct because he could not see the color red. Now, mind you, pink is more red than blaze orange. Now, there is such thing as cool pink, there is such thing as hot pink. Most of these are warm pink. Same thing with cool red and warm red, which most of these, if you're not an artist and into painting, would not understand that. But just be aware that, by looking at these two vests, to me, neither one really stands out more than one another. If you want to talk about safety reasons, now most hunters would rather wear camouflage so that we stay concealed from the animals more. Gives us a little bit more advantage on hunting. But if you want to talk about safety, why not go with high vis? And I'm talking about the yellow greenish color that is worn by construction workers, retail workers that are grabbing shopping carts, other people that are like do a lot of work outdoors and they need to be noticed. I'm going to put up a picture of a few high vis jackets so you can see what color I'm talking about. They're the very bright greenish yellow. To be honest with you, I have been walking in the woods during both hunting and non-hunting season and have seen people coming through the woods. One was wearing blaze orange and the person they were with was wearing high vis. The person that I noticed first, whether it be during the peak of fall foliage, or much like today where there's absolutely no leaves on the trees at all, what we call stick season here in New England, the person that I noticed first was the one wearing high vis, which is that yellowish greenish color. So if it's a big safety concern, just go with that. Never mind introducing hot pink versus orange, because as I showed you in the two vests earlier, and I'll put up the picture again, my eyes are not really drawn to either color as standing out one more of the other versus seeing high vis in the woods. So that's my thought on that. But yeah, every year or every so many years, the powers that be bring up the discussion again about switching from blaze orange to hot pink in color because they feel the blaze orange blends in too much with fall foliage here in the northern states. So if it was me and I was the powers that be, not one who gets out in the woods hunting, because some of these people do not, they just sit at a desk, I would probably be looking more at high vis, at least going to and from your stands. If you really if you're really talking about safety and being visible in the woods. But in all reality, regardless of what you wear, when you shoot, you really should know what your target is and what's behind it. Never mind taking a shot at the first thing that moves or what you think you see, because that's one of the reasons why they did away with quail or partridge hunting here in Rhode Island. They don't stock for it anymore. You can still hunt for one of the species of birds, although it's not too common as a native species anymore. And the reason being is a pheasant will fly upwards as it takes off, whereas a partridge or quail, they will fly up till they get about waist high on a person and then fly straight out. So rather than going where you should be shooting up, you're actually shooting straight across, and they feel too many hunters were being shot, and that's why they did away with quail and partridge as far as stalking them in the woods. Made it illegal to hunt most of those species except for one or two. I think the bobwhite is one that might still be available to hunt, although I would have to check the regulations because truthfully I really do not see any quail or partridge here in Rhode Island anymore. You would have to go up north to like New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont, because they are all over the place. Let's talk about the high vis versus going with pink, because I don't know anybody who's going to wear pink. I don't know anybody who, even if they do enforce it. Also, to me, the high vis orange versus pink, to my eye, nothing really stands out more as a color that I would see first. Okay, so for those of you watching the video version of this podcast, I am about 2 miles in the woods right now, pretty much in the middle of nowhere. And that, my friend, is a birthday balloon that is landed over here. So if you lose or release balloons, this is what happens. They land out in the middle of the woods, out in the middle of nowhere, and it's going to take decades for that to degrade, if ever. And to show you what my surrounding looks like, there is absolutely nothing around me because I am literally about a mile or 2 miles in the woods. Matter of fact, I am up near the tri-state marker, not too far from it, where Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut come together. So yeah, that is a birthday balloon. Show you a little closer so that you can get the picture for those who are watching the video version of this podcast. So please, please, do not release balloons. I mean, you can't help if they get away from you, but do not purposely release balloons. Especially in rural areas, because they will land out here and pose a threat to wildlife. I don't know if you can hear that. That noise right there is a sure sign of spring. I'm down at a vernal pool. That sound is the sound of hundreds of wood frogs during the mating season. I can see them on the surface swimming around. That is definitely a sign of spring once those frogs start. So a couple more things about the end of hunting season this year. First of all, we've already discussed the number of pheasant, quail, and partridge out in the woods and possibly the reason why, but let's talk about other wild animals, other small games. Now, you might have had different experience than what we had up here in Rhode Island. I know some of you hunt Connecticut, and you say you've had a lot more animals out in the woods, but here in Rhode Island, even though it is springtime, it's a beautiful day, there are still hardly any Tweety birds, and so far, still no squirrels. The woods that I'm in right now used to be totally loaded with Tweety birds and squirrels. Now, I don't know if the decline has to do with the amount of people who are hiking and also the amount of people that were hunting up through here, has to do with climate change or what, but what's happening to the wildlife in our woods? I mean, I'm about a mile, 2 miles deep in our woods right now, and again, not seeing any squirrels, not seeing any Tweety birds. I've heard a few down when I was closer to the road, populated areas. You know, are they moving into the populated areas because of the amount of bird feeders and just gave up on wild food? I don't know. Just don't know. Also, let's talk a little bit more about deer hunting. Yes, I did get a 6-pointer this year. I shot one doe that I could not find. It had no blood trail. I circled and circled for hours, did not find any trace of it. I've known other people that shot deer this year, and they're all saying the same thing. Most of the deer that were taken or they shot and didn't find did not have a blood trail. And what I mean by that is there was no blood on the ground. They searched, you know, with flashlights. I have a black light that illuminates blood, and other people have that, and they said the same thing. So if you can all tell me what's going on with these deer and why there's no blood trail. Is it because of the change in ammunition? Is it because of climate change? Is it because of wasting disease? Is it because of other factors? But why has there been no blood? On the buck, the 6-pointer that I got this year, the only blood that was on the ground was where it fell dead. As far as that, from the time that I shot it to where I found it, there was absolutely no blood at all. So, and very little blood on the fur where I had shot it. So, I don't know. Leave your comments down below on this and also some of the other things that we discussed so far. Tell me your thoughts on some of the things that we discussed. I'd love to hear from other people, who are into hunting and other sports, what their thoughts on some of these subjects that I've covered so far. Alrighty, again, for those of you who are watching the video version of this podcast, you can see that the state really has been coming up here with heavy equipment. Makes me wonder if this is a routine maintenance for fire season, or are they possibly getting ready to do some logging up in here? Because you can see they pushed a lot of rocks off the road. So I don't know what the plans are. I haven't heard anything. There were no release statements, but yeah, they've been doing a lot of work on this road with heavy equipment. Well, for those watching the video version of this, I guess I got my answer. They are logging up through here. This is not the area that they're proposing putting in a tiny house campground. This is state hunting land. This is an area I was hoping to find deer sheds in, because these were all fields that deer used to bed down in. These are all pheasant fields. So I totally understand forest conservation and how young forests provide better food source for the animals and such, but the amount of clear cutting that's going on in my town of Barville, Rhode Island right now is absolutely sickening, with the amount of solar fields, apartments, um, other buildings, professional spaces that they're putting in. It just really worries me when I see clear cutting going on like that. You know, are they proposing more solar fields and developments? I would hope not, since this is state management land, but I don't know. By the looks of the landscape, when they clear cut like that, just totally makes me sad. But, you know, I understand that there are reasons behind it, but also at the same time, last few years we have had some droughts and there's been some forest fires. So with all that dead wood that usually gets left behind, I've seen what logging companies do up in Maine, and the amount of dead wood that gets left behind really, really worries me come fire season. You know, is that gonna go up like a huge tinderbox? I hope not, but I've seen people have campfires out here in places that they're not supposed to, so I don't know. Kind of worries me for summer fire season, especially with the last couple of years and the drought we've been having. So the other thing I also worry about with the clear cutting, besides the amount that's going on, is I've been through up in Maine where they've done logging, and not so much the actual forests owned by the tree companies and the lumber companies. Those forests that are owned by the tree and lumber companies, I've actually seen them clean those up nicely after logging and plant other trees. But as far as other areas they logged, I've seen the amount of chipped wood or wood shavings, sawdust all left behind. I've seen dead trees, down trees all left behind. And it also worries me that because that was a pheasant field and the amount of tall, dry grass up there, that would become a tinderbox during the fire season in the middle of summer. Last year we had a drought, and it was a severe drought, and 10 acres had burnt here in Barville from a campfire that was not supposed to be there, but technically properly put out, that had burnt underground and sprung up in another location. I have seen campfire rings up through these woods on the state management area. So, you know, hopefully this is not going to set up for another brush or forest fire. You know, hopefully they clean this up and do something properly. But, you know, again, it just worries me because that was a very dry grass pheasant field earlier this year. Alrighty, well, I was hoping to actually end this podcast with a second day of hiking instead of being in the studio, but with the amount of wind we're getting today, it would have led to a load grade rumble in the audio, even with a windsock. So we're in the studio today to end this video podcast. So yesterday I was out on the hike and I posted on Facebook various clips of the video about the clear cutting that's going on up in Buck Hill. It raised a lot of comments back and forth about whether this is proper forest management versus excessive clear cutting. And what we mean by that is, why did they clear cut so much land versus doing thinning and clearing away invasive underbrush and prescribed burns? Why so much trees were cut down? There was a lady hiking up through there, said they ruined the beauty of the area and the little fields that they had. A group of teenagers, possibly with a 4-H club, because they had some nature gear, a cooler, trash collection, and some type of orange bags around their chest, although they didn't identify who they were, had said that it was totally disgusting with the amount of trees that were cut. So the question is, whether this is proper management or excessive cutting. Also led to a lot of discussion about the amount of clear cutting that's going on in this town for solar fields, affordable apartments and low-income apartments and professional suites. Why is so much land in Barville being cleared when their land could be put to better usage, especially with the amount of solar fields going in. Also led to a lot of discussion about where the money is coming from, where the money is going, and also don't be surprised that given the state's and towns' history that and the history behind the old proposed power plant, which was defeated, and that was also going to be put on a combination of state management land and also private gas company land, that don't be surprised that they would actually put a fenced off solar field in the middle of state management land. So there's a lot of discussion going on back and forth on whether this is going to better the area with a new, younger growth forest, or this is something else going on. Both the town residents and the Barville Land Trust, regardless of what side you're on, are both sickened by the amount of development, clear cutting, and solar fields being put in this town. We're losing our rural natural heritage of this town and the history of this town for what seems to be a money-grabbing scheme. We're losing a lot of it. We're becoming more suburbanized, which a lot of people don't like. So, yeah, I'm just going to leave it with that for now. So the DEM did get back to me, and they said that this is not a clear-cutting project. Basically, they're working with a contractor to create a 100-foot buffer surrounding the grassland fields in an effort to enhance wildlife habitat through field edge softening. The project was going to allow for better light exposure in the fields, which have been degrading recently due to increased shading. The improved grass coverage will create cover for both wildlife and pheasant stalking. Additionally, the cleared edges will regrow as shrubland that will provide much needed gradient from grassland to open secondary forest understory. The shrub edges are important for game species like rabbit, deer, and upland birds, but also serve as important thermal gradients for various species of turtles and other reptiles as they transition from warm field to the cool forest. DM management compensation land will remain preserved for wildlife habitat and the enjoyment of outdoor recreation enthusiasts. So I was kind of glad to see that this is not another clear cut or a solar field that is actually going in. I am very, very glad that the DEM is starting to do some proper forest maintenance. Like I said, this is the end of hunting season for this year. We're going to be concentrating on getting out camping very shortly, getting out fishing very shortly, getting out doing some more hiking as long as the weather permits and we don't have 100-degree days and severe drought like we had before. Speaking of fishing, I was supposed to go to a fishing show up in Massachusetts today. However, the person I invited to go with me never responded. And since then, today would have been the second day of the show, but there have been comments posted about this fishing show on their sponsored page that this fishing show may have not been worth going. A lot of these things, you can find similar items at Cabela's. So paying the $10 entrance fee really would not have been worth it, since there are similar items available that you can just walk into Cabela's for free at any time. Also, it would have been a 45-minute drive for me, and some of the comments were that the show is so small, you were in and out inside of 5 to 15 minutes. So driving to 45 minutes with a $10 entrance fee, and also given the fact that of how small I've heard the show was, I chose not to go today. There'll be other shows coming up in my area that I may or may not attend. But perfectly be honest with you, I work in sporting goods, where there's a lot of fishing equipment and camping equipment sold, and I have other stores around me. So, I gotta pick and choose what shows I decide to go, whether it's going to be in my interest or not. So, yeah, that's going to wrap up the podcast. This is the podcast number 2. Hoping to bring you more of these, whether they be in the studio or outdoor hiking. Like I said, if you're listening to an audio version of this, because I am not sure YouTube's intentions with their new podcast and podcast playlists, whether they're going to post audio versions on other sites or make just audio versions available. This podcast is also a video version on my YouTube channel, Scott Hervieux Outdoors. And there goes my camera again. Yeah, I'm still looking for an action camera. Still haven't decided on whether I'm just going to go with another GoPro or if I'm going to get the Insta360 X3 360 camera, because I really want a 360 camera so that, when I'm filming, not only is it recording me personally, it's also recording everything around me, so that while I'm fishing in my kayak and reeling in that big fish, not only can I pick and choose the scenes from me reeling them in, but it will also capture if the fish decides to jump like a lot of bass and trout do, which would make for some excellent video. Also, plus when I'm driving down the street, it'll be easier to record me sitting in the driver's seat and also record what's going on out the windshield at the same time without having to try switch back and forth. So, still debating and researching which one. I know what I'm leaning towards, but the funding with that right now being a small YouTube channel that's not monetized right now, and I don't work with any sponsorships. There's a lot of things right now that's making me think about justifying the cost, although I do need another action camera. Plus, I'm also looking at upgrading my camera, although my ZV-1 is excellent. I would like to get a Sony FX3 with a couple lenses, or a Sony FX30 with a couple lenses, just for more cinema-like filming, and also to be able to get better low-light capabilities, because I do a lot of sunsets, sunrises, and early morning and late night walks. So anyway, that's going to end the podcast for this week, podcast number 2. I apologize for the length between the two podcasts, the first and the second one, but, life happens sometimes, and I do like to be outdoors more than in the studio. So we'll catch you next time. This is Scott Hervieux with Scott Hervieux Outdoors. Again, check out my YouTube channel if you're listening to the audio version of this, which is Scott Hervieux, Hervieux, as in X-ray, Outdoors. And we'll see you the next time.